Hi, my name's Kyle, and today I'm going to talk about whether or not you're getting the most out of your practice, or if you're actually hurting your overall musicality by practicing the wrong things. Today I'm going to talk about some controversial topics, mainly evolution and spirituality, and how it can make you a better musician. Not all practice is created equal, and sometimes when you're practicing, you may be hurting your playing more than you think. This video is about the questions you need to be considering when you are practicing, and it's about what I think is probably the most beneficial things to work on that improve all areas of your playing. So this all started because I was watching a video by this channel called Primer, and they do evolution simulations, and one of the conclusions was that for a new organism to achieve parabolic growth and actually survive, it had to have its chance of death be significantly lower than its chance to reproduce, which is pretty obvious, but it has some big implications for practicing and how to practice better. So in order to realize how it affects practicing, we need to sort of redefine our terminology. So in this case, death will represent when you practice something, and if you practice it too much, you actually get worse at it, and if you practice that thing, it actually makes different areas of your playing worse, even though you weren't practicing them. And we'll say that reproduction will be redefined as practicing something and you actually get better at it, or it makes other areas of your playing better even though you weren't practicing them specifically. Now this won't only apply to what you practice, but also how you practice and some other areas of music like performing. So this got me thinking, like, what things am I practicing that are actually hurting my playing more than they help my playing? And it also made me think, okay, well, if there is one thing or a couple things that I do that actually help my playing the most and help the most areas of my playing, I want to know what those are. Most things aren't so black and white that they only hurt your playing or they only improve your playing. Usually it's a balance. Some things will help your playing quite a lot and only hurt it a little bit, and other things will hurt it quite a lot but only improve your playing a tiny bit, and you got to find what those ones are and eliminate those practices because you're wasting your time. And another thing to think about is that sometimes things will help your playing a certain amount and hurt it to a lesser degree, but over time it'll flip, and you want to know when the balance has shifted so that you can stop at the right time. But first, let's talk about the things that help your playing more than anything else. So, in order to know what's the most beneficial thing to work on, we have to understand what applies to the most areas of our playing. We need to understand the underlying elements of music. This is what all the greats talk about when they say fundamentals. You know, it's not enough to work on things like licks and the specific ways people played songs or chord progressions or scale patterns. You need to understand why they work and the techniques and rhythms behind it. Alright, so here's my hierarchy of what I think you should be working on if you want to get the most out of your practice. So all the stuff that's higher is basically less foundational, and stuff that's lower has more things that stand upon that foundation. And so you need to make sure these foundations are strong, or else everything above them will crumble. And so this includes a lot of the important fundamentals, but it doesn't include all of them. Victor Wooten's book has about 10. You could add more, but this will do for today. And I won't have too much time to talk about this stuff. I'm mostly going to talk about it down here. I'll make separate videos, but with specifics, it really just refers to things that don't apply to other areas of your playing. Like if you learn a classical piece and you can't use elements of what you learned in other areas of your playing, then it's a very specific thing. You know, if you learn a lick and you can only play it in one key in one song, then it's specific. But if you break those things apart and understand the harmony behind it, the rhythm, the technique, you know, these other categories, then you've left the realm of specifics. I would always caution people to be in the realm of specifics too much. I think the only area where it's really important is just increasing your repertoire. So specifics include things like licks and specific fingerings for scales and, you know, different pieces, and really whenever you're not taking the time to understand why all that stuff works, you're in the realm of specifics. And if you work on the specifics, you're not helping any of these other areas. So then below specifics is notes and harmony. To me, that's the same category. In Victor Wooten's book, he calls it notes. And it's just anything to do with playing notes. If it's chords, if it's scales, if it's connecting your ear to your instrument, it's all the same category to me. And a lot of musicians like to make the excuse that, you know, players like Django Reinhardt, Jimi Hendrix, and all of them, they didn't understand music theory, so they say, oh, you don't need it. But those players did understand theory, but they only understood it from the perspective of connecting their ear to their instrument, which is extremely important. But to say that they didn't understand theory is not really true. And then I put rhythm in on the same level. Basically everything you do uses rhythm. Even if you're playing rubato, there's sort of a rubato rhythm. And everything you do, unless you're just playing drums, it all has notes, so all this stuff is very important. Basically from here down, we're going to use all of this stuff every time we're playing. So if you work on any of these categories, you're improving everything you play. So then I put technique is more essential than notes and harmony and rhythm. And some people might criticize me for doing this because there's a lot of players that can shred that have terrible sense of rhythm and don't really do anything cool with the harmony or with their note choice. And they're setting a bad example, but basically everything you do up here requires some level of technique to make that sound happen. So technique is required to make this happen, this is required to make this happen, and this, you know, this all influences everything up. So technique is more essential than this stuff, although I'm not sure I would use the term more important. But whenever you play rhythm, you're using technique, so it's a bit more essential. And then so I have two categories of technique. This one really refers to the body and how you play your instrument. So it refers to muscle tension, consistency, accuracy, and I think of technique as the interface between mind and instrument. And then so that brings me to the next technique. So this is like body technique, and down here you have mental technique. And I'll talk more about it in a sec, but basically anything that influences your mind and how you think is going to be in this category. And then down here is our mystery category. and I can't spoil it. I'll make a separate video for these categories. Really, they all deserve their own video, and this will be too long. So I'm going to just focus on these two because I don't really hear anyone talking about this stuff, and yet it's probably the most important. When you're working on all this stuff from technique up, you can be improving certain areas of your playing while hurting other areas, and the degree to which you hurt your playing will change depending on the circumstance and where you're at with your playing. But down here, I'll talk about it later, but I don't think you can hurt your playing at all by improving this stuff. Another thing I need to mention is that if you work on stuff up here and you're not hurting your playing, you should still think of yourself as hurting your playing if you're ignoring more important stuff. So even though you may be improving, you could be improving more, and to choose something that's lesser of importance over something more important, to me, is the same thing as hurting your playing. Because you're giving up your most valuable thing, which is time, for something less important. If you work on something and you get better, but it's not as important as something you could have been working on, like for example, I had a student that I remember one day came to me wanting to learn some like blues licks, and the guy's technique is atrocious. Anything I could have taught him would have been a waste of time because it wouldn't have fixed the underlying problem. He didn't understand notes and he didn't understand technique and he wasn't focused. I mean, even if you do get better, it won't matter because you'll be so frustrated with technique that you just give up. So in the long run, you've hurt your playing by just giving up that much more time that you could have spent on something important. And I think there's a time limit for some people. If you don't get good enough in a certain period of time, you will give up. And so if you don't work on what's important soon enough, then even though you have improved, you will hurt your playing because you're going to run out of time before you don't have the motivation to do the hard stuff. And then you'll never get what you really wanted to play music for, which is enjoyment. So the question becomes, is there anything more fundamental than your mind and how you think? And to me, there might be. I'm not going to pose any answers because I think it's up to the individual to decide what they believe. But if there is something below how you think, you know, your thoughts are just little neurological connections, and in some way they're just a physical thing, a physical aspect of your body. Most cultures talk about the spirit as being something very real, and there's a reason why religion has existed for such a long time. So if there's anything more fundamental than your thought patterns, it would be your spirit and your connection with that spirit or God or a higher purpose or a higher power, whatever you want to call it. I'm not here to tell you that it's real or that it's not real, but if you do believe in it, you should consider it a very important part of your musical progress. I like to just think that I'm connecting with music itself. I do like to think about my own purpose, but the most important thing I think is just connecting with music itself. But you should consider it, like, why are so many great musicians coming out of a church and gospel background? I'm not going to tell you what I think, just consider it. Like, here's a ton of musicians who are pretty religious. We got Chris Dave, Aretha Franklin, Mateus Asado, Jacob Collier, Chick Corea, Beethoven, Bach, I'm sure Mozart was, Isaiah Sharkey, Steve Vai, Corey Henry, Larry Graham. And I know Victor Wooten doesn't identify with a specific religion, but he says that his friends all identify him as very spiritual, and I know for a fact that he works on its connection with music, and he sees it as an entity that you should be connected with. And if all that exists, that's the most important thing to work on, because it would affect everything. Remember that your life and that your body is the instrument, not your physical instruments, not your guitars or your drums or pianos or whatever. You are the instrument. And whatever you can do to improve your life will, in theory, improve how you connect with music. Now, I think it's incredibly important to develop a connection with music in the very least. And when you deeply connect with music, it'll improve all areas of your playing, even though you haven't really worked on them. Now, it's hard to give specific things you can do to improve your connection with spirit or music or God. You'll have to come up with them on your own. Perhaps just being a good person will improve your musicianship. It's hard to say. Perhaps just getting your life together will improve your musicianship. Most of the things that I have found very helpful to improve my connection are actually more in the realm of mental technique. So let's talk about mental technique again so that I can give you something tangible to work on. So with mental technique, to me it comes down to two categories. You've got emotion and your attention span. So first, let's talk about emotion. With emotion, to me, the most important thing is the habitual emotion you feel when you practice. So, for example, if you keep practicing something that you hate and you dread it, you're gonna dread your practice sessions, and you're gonna dread playing music. It'll bleed into every area of your playing. But if you can find a way to love your practice sessions, then that'll infect all areas of your playing, and you'll just love playing music. You'll get excited to practice, and you'll basically get addicted to it. And you'll improve so much faster if you actually enjoy what you're working on while you're working on it. Be very careful of practicing things you hate and habitually hating your practice, because it'll corrode every area of your playing. I forgot to mention this one tip you can do if you don't like practicing something, but it's very important. Say it's like technique, rhythm, or understanding harmony and visualizing it on your instrument. You can trick your brain into thinking that you like it, and then you will like it to some degree, at least more than you would if you didn't do this. It's very simple. You can smile, and you can just say over and over, oh, I love practicing this. I love working on this. It feels pretty strange, but your brain doesn't really get it. It's like, oh, I guess I do like it. And then it releases the same chemicals that it would release if you actually did like it. And then you'll grow to like it. Then you'll get better. And then you'll definitely grow to like it. You really do need to find ways to enjoy working on the important, hard things to work on. Whether it's playing over chord changes and playing arpeggios, or really getting your technique down, or really improving your rhythm drastically. If you don't like just smiling and faking it till you make it, basically, you can come up with games, and really, it's up to you to be creative. I'll make a video on that some other time, but with games you want to just limit yourself. For example, on guitar, if you're working on chord changes, you could limit yourself to just the D and G strings and try improvising within that limitation. There's really an infinite number of ways that you can come up with creative ways of practicing. So if you're bored, it's up to you to find an interesting way of practicing something that is important to work on. Now the other area of emotion, well, there's two things. I don't work on either of them, but you may want to. The first one is you can just play really simple things or play along with jam tracks. Make sure you don't have to think too much about what you're doing. You can even just play one note, and all you want to do is put as much emotion as you can into that note and just channel it. There's no right or wrong, but that'll help you connect with what you're already feeling. The other thing you can do is what actors and actresses do to get in the headspace to play a part. They usually trigger some emotion. Say they want to be sad, they may think about a death of a loved one or something, and that'll bring up all this negative emotion, and they'll use that to really embody the role. You can do that to play sad stuff, or you can think about your cat if you want to be happy and play some happy groovy stuff, But like I said, I don't work on that stuff because I personally don't have much issue connecting with the music. The issue for me is getting out of my head and getting out of my own way. And what I mean is just getting my technique and getting my understanding so good that I don't have to think about those things, and then the emotion just flows naturally for me. But you may be different. Another key element to connecting emotionally with your playing is to learn from musicians that already connect emotionally with you. So for me, I like to learn lines that Derek Trucks played, or that Amy Winehouse played, or like Leanne LaHavis. I think when you try and play along with recordings of artists that you already really like, and you try and copy their lines perfectly, you can kind of absorb the emotion they used when they were playing, and that'll help you because you're connecting with a musician that you already love the sound of. Just play along with recordings you already love and try to mimic what they're saying. The other element of mental technique comes down to your cognitive abilities. The better you can think, the better you can play. And the better you can get things into your subconscious, you'll play way better if everything's subconscious. Because your conscious brain is too slow, but your subconscious is very powerful. And a lot of that just comes down to doing things for years. But let's talk about some other stuff you can do. One thing you can do is fix your attention span. People in the modern day and age have garbage attention spans, and it's because of social media and computers and TV and all that stuff. So one thing you can do is start meditating. What I like to do is I just keep it simple. Basically, all I do is I sit down, close my eyes, and you can either focus on the breath as it goes across your upper lip or your mustache, or what I do is I focus on my heartbeat, and whenever your mind drifts, you try and catch it as quick as you can and bring it back. That's what your attention span is. It's just the time it takes for your mind to drift combined with the time it takes for you to notice that it drifted and bring it back. You can improve your attention span, and that'll improve your playing because it improves your ability to think and stay focused, which is very important to playing music. Another thing you can do, which I think is incredibly important, and it's pretty easy because it's not really about doing, it's about not doing. And what I mean is stop being on Instagram all day, stop being on Facebook all day, stop picking up your phone whenever you get a notification. Stop being on YouTube. I know this is a YouTube channel, but maybe you should reduce the amount of time you're on YouTube. All that stuff is literally proven to hurt your attention span. And another element that really affects your attention span and your ability to think and even your ability to learn is what you eat. And I know I'm not good about this, but if you get your diet on track, you can learn faster and think clearer. The science is there. Just figure out how to get your diet on track. I'm really just preaching to myself here, but it's very important. Ultimately, you can already play much better than you think you can, but you have to get into the flow state in order to do so. Now, I've only had a handful, maybe 5 times when I was really in the flow state while playing. There were 2 times where it was much more drastic than the others, and it's profound. It's really addicting, and I'm really just trying to get back to that. And a lot of it comes down to getting things like technique and your understanding of harmony and solid rhythm, getting all those things into your subconscious brain so you're not consciously thinking about it. Your subconscious is like thousands of times faster than your conscious brain. So you have to get things into your subconscious. The other thing you got to do is you got to get out of your head. You got to stop critiquing yourself while you're improvising and stuff like that. You got to stop thinking about things that don't matter in the moment. Be in the moment, and it just comes back to meditation. Like, the better you can be in the moment, the better you can play music. Guys like Keith Jarrett and Victor Wooten, they're always in the flow state, or at least it seems that way to me. And I feel that way about Derek Trucks too. These guys are really channeling stuff because they've gotten their conscious brain out of the way so that they can just flow. You can read the book Flow. It's pretty famous. I'm not going to try and pronounce the dude's name because it's crazy, but there's a lot of science behind this stuff. So these are the requirements for enjoying your practice. Flow is just another way of saying that you're in the zone and you're really enjoying what you're doing. And you're enjoying it so much that time just flies. And that's generally my reason for being late, is because I'm practicing and I lose track of time. But anyways, along this axis is challenge and this is skill. I took this from the book Flow. And so basically, when you first start, you have no skill really, so it doesn't take much challenge for you to be frustrated. And I think a lot of people actually start off just biting off more than they can chew. But anyways, if you want to enjoy what you're doing, don't challenge yourself too much when you're down here in your skill level. But as your skill increases, you'll get bored. And so what you gotta do is increase the challenge. If you're over here, you just decrease the challenge. And ideally, you want to kind of move in like a zigzag. As your skill increases, you keep increasing the challenge. And remember, you can be in flow at any point. So if you suck, you can still enjoy your practice. If you're amazing, you can enjoy it. But it's just easier to be bored because there's a lot more room of challenge that's boring. But the other thing is that air guitar would technically be like down here. It's still kind of in the flow channel because its only purpose is having fun, but there's no challenge and no skill required. So use this as a guide. Anytime you're frustrated, decrease the challenge. Anytime you're bored, increase the challenge. And this also applies to performing. So basically, if you're performing and you're feeling tons of anxiety, you aren't confident enough and you need to be more skilled. Now, in most cases, you can't decrease the challenge. Say you joined a band, they want a specific sound, you need to rise up to that challenge. So if it's too challenging, you need to increase your skill before you get kicked out. And if you're over here and you're bored, well, you're probably hurting your connection with music, and I honestly don't recommend being in bands that you hate. But if you are, and you really need to be, you need to increase the challenge. And that doesn't mean playing crazy jazz stuff when it's inappropriate, like over reggae tunes or something. It just means you need to focus on more subtle things, like maybe your vibrato speed or where you end notes, or just being absurdly rhythmically tight. It's up to you to increase the challenge so that you enter the flow state again. Because no matter where you are in your skill level, you can always be in here. And I think it's kind of your job to stay in this flow state. Now, one thing I want to talk about is how at the beginning of the chart, challenge is not quite as high as skill. Now, that's not to say, like over here, you can have like higher challenge than you have skill. So you can outpace skill with challenge, but only to a certain degree. And at the core of it, your skill should pretty much outpace your challenge. And I like to think about what Guthrie Govan says with this. Like, he likes to talk about how he sort of has another notch higher, another gear he can like shift into at any point and just really, crush it. And I think the most important thing about that is just having confidence that if for some reason the band leader just increased the challenge on the spot, you could handle it because you have that extra skill as like skill headroom, and it just promotes confidence, and the more confident you are, the more likely you're going to be in flow. If you're anxious, you're not in flow. Here is the summary. Okay, so you gotta work on the fundamentals, don't just work on specific things. Make sure you understand what you're doing very deeply. Question the spiritual side of music and find some sort of personal meaning with that. You gotta foster a love or connection with music. And I didn't mention before, but with professional musicians, be careful of hating listening to music. I try to make sure that I still love to listen to music. It would be kind of worrisome if you didn't like listening to music, but you were a musician. And then drastically limit your use of your phone for social media, TV, the internet, all that bad stuff. That's going to hurt your attention span. Eat better, meditate, find ways to enjoy what you practice and what you play in a performance setting. Get in the flow state, make games to make practicing fun. I'll make another video on that. Smile, trick your brain, fake it till you make it, basically. And then, I didn't mention this, but be playful, have a playful attitude. I think that's the secret of people like Django. And then imitate musicians you love and play along with recordings. That is absurdly crucial. I'll also make another video for that. And then practice dropping into an emotional state like an actor or actress would. And that's pretty much it. Make sure to hit the thumbs up, even if you hated it. Leave a comment telling me how much I suck. Make it as mean as possible. And then also let me know what you'd like me to make in the future. And check out my band Rusa. And see ya.